Salutary, and salutations. I just wanted to chat with you real quick. Appreciate you checking in. This is going to go up on my personal channel at Rayvon Hackshaw. I'm going to try to keep these, they're going to be a little bit less formal. They're going to be shorter. They're going to be less processed to the degree that I'm good at processing videos and editing and all that stuff, just so that I can kind of be more regular and consistent about putting things out. But I wanted to chat real quick about something that I feel a pretty comfortable level of consensus about, and that's Michael Porter Jr. Hindsight, of course, but 6 months in on the Michael Porter Jr. trade, I think we lost the trade. And that's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that the Nuggets can't compete. It doesn't mean the Nuggets can't contend in the future. But when we really break this down, first of all, in a vacuum, right, the trade is Michael Porter Jr. and a 2032 first for Cam Johnson. In context, and that's, I think, the conversation I think people are going to go to immediately as well. Think about the context, and for Denver, what it's meant is that they've been able to bring in Jonas Valanciunas. They might go a little bit further and say that, well, we were able to bring in Jonas and Tim Hardaway Jr. and Bruce Brown, and I have to push back on that a little bit, just because, look, at the end of the day, Tim Hardaway Jr., Bruce Brown, those guys are minimum contracts. It didn't matter what Denver did in the offseason. They would have been able to bring in those two no matter in any case, right? So me personally, I don't consider them a part of that trade. I don't consider them a part of the context of that deal. But Valanciunas, I think, has been a boon for Denver, unfortunately, while he's on the court, which he will be out in some of the most needed time. But he has been good when he's been playing, so it's not like I'm going to blame him individually for that. But when it comes to brass tacks, Denver traded a better player for a worse player and attached a first-round pick to do it. Like, I think that's the bottom line to me. Michael Porter Jr., he was more productive in Denver than Cam has been in Denver. He is more productive in Brooklyn than Cam was in Brooklyn. And as much as people have this complaint about his contract and his salary and always getting paid all this money, and won't someone think of the shareholders and think of the Cronkies, and they don't want to go into the tax again? Oh no. Well, guess what? We're looking around the league and we're looking at a guy who has 2 years left on a max deal. Yes, it's a max deal, but it's not the $60 million, $70 million some of these other guys on max deals are getting paid. It's like 40, 45, right? So not only is the number not as high as a lot of his contemporaries, but it's also expiring next year, right? And it's actually a pretty valuable deal, and he has a skill set that's immensely valuable around the league. And not only has he shown his ability to be a shooter, but also to scale his game up in a way that I think a lot of Nuggets fans, no disrespect, just weren't giving him enough credit for. I think a lot of the digging into, oh, well, he can't do, he's a Jokic merchant, or he can't lead in his own right, or he lacks the talent to do so. There's something about me, and I don't want to say it's just because he's 6'10", but when you have that combination of his skill as a shooter and at his size, the game is just going to come easy to him no matter what. And I think that's a big reason why not only has he been able to maintain his efficiency, but he's been able to do it at a higher volume. Because as he's told people many a time, he doesn't see contests. So even if it's not Jokic feeding him this open pass, even if it's not him standing wide open in the corner, he doesn't see it anyway. And I think that's why he's a 26 point per game scorer on better efficiency. And the caveat was always, oh, well, you can't build a good defense around him. He's the defensive problem, which I think is also just untrue, frankly. Is he the most mobile, the most athletic 6'10" guy in the league? No. but he's not so immobile. He's not so unimpactful that you can't build a good defense around him, as the Nets are showing right now. So unfortunate. I mean, not fortunately for them, and sadly for Denver, Michael Porter Jr. is part of one of the best defenses in the league right now, as of the last month and a half. So at the end of the day, it's my opinion that as much as, because we've had this conversation about Tim Connolly, where I think people are looking at him with a bit of a side eye right now at what he's doing with the Timberwolves and what he did in Denver and how he had his types, right? And we're looking at Calvin Booth with infinite numbers of side eyes, because people hate the Zeke contract and people hate this thing he did and people hate that, and people love Michael Malone, and people don't like the conflict. But as much and as much as I think people were excited to say that, to bury him and say, well, Calvin Booth was the worst, the first thing I think the new front office has done is trade a better player for a worse player, and in the process attaching Denver's most valuable draft asset. And as evidenced by what Brooklyn might well turn around and do is ask other players, they're going to get more draft capital back when they trade for Michael Porter, because actually that deal is not that bad. It's actually not a negative in the way that people framed it as. Yeah. So that sucks. Anyway, that's all I got for you right now. You're doing the best you can. I think it's a misstep. And I think where it's really going to hurt Denver is that Denver no longer has that draft asset. If you wanted to make another move, where I think if they were a little bit more patient, if they didn't negotiate from a position of, I think they felt this urgency that you had to make changes. And in the process, they put themselves in a position to negotiate from a position of weakness. And I think that's a mistake. That said, you got to learn the lesson and move on and do what you can with what you have. So hopefully Denver can utilize this flexibility they have to make more moves, and hopefully they do something at the deadline that can maybe shore themselves up for the next month and a half stretch that they're going to be without Jokic, without Cam, while they don't have Christian, while they don't have Aaron. Maybe they can do something, or that in the future they can extend this window of opportunity to the point, especially with an aging roster, to the point where when that 2032 pick comes around, that's not the number 5 pick in the draft, the number 3 pick in the draft, the number 1 pick in the draft. That would be devastating, I think, in hindsight, if y'all ended up doing that. So hopefully it goes well. I'll see y'all later. And as always, Nuggets forever.